Hi everyone, so today we'll be looking at A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens with the following themes in mind. We'll also be doing a close analysis of the quotes and touch on a few context points throughout the video. Okay, so let's get started. Firstly, looking at the theme of Scrooge's redemption and transformation. The first quote shows a newly transformed Scrooge in Stave 5, honouring to keep Christmas in his heart all year round. Notice the use of the word heart is a good example of how Dickens uses emotive language, immediately showing Scrooge to now feel an emotional connection to Christmas despite his attitude before. Now, as a context point, Dickens' use of emotive language here and displaying Scrooge's transformation this way is a reminder to his readers that their kind, charitable, and generous ways should be something they continue to do all year round, not just Christmas. The second quote from Stave 2 shows Scrooge's reaction to the ghost of Christmas past, presenting him with the way Scrooge once was, and encouraging him to recognise that he might still have the capacity for change. Here you can talk about the exclamation mark being used to show Scrooge's initial resistance to change. You could also discuss the significance of the supernatural force of the ghosts, being something which essentially gets the ball rolling with Scrooge later changing for the better. Just a quick reminder, if you're finding this video helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Okay, so now onto the theme of social responsibility and injustice. This is one of the major themes in the text. The first quote is Scrooge questioning the two charity workers that he's approached by, who are asking him for donations to help the poor. Scrooge asks them where the workhouses and prisons are. This is a really important quote to remember, as it's quite versatile, so you can use this for a lot of exam-style questions. This quote presents Scrooge as very sarcastic and to have a major lack of empathy and generosity, reinforced through the use of the rhetorical questions, which emphasise his sarcasm towards a serious situation. Also, the fact that he feels people who are poor belong in prisons criminalises them, even though they haven't done anything wrong. Regarding the warehouses, this acts as a really interesting bit of context. Remember, this is why I said this is a great quote to use. Dickens' dad actually worked in a warehouse. Therefore, Dickens almost had a kind of first-hand experience of the prejudice and hardships faced by the poor. So him giving Scrooge this dialogue exposes the ignorance of the upper class, whilst also highlighting to the readers the challenges faced by those in poverty and their treatment in society. The second quote from Stave 3 shows the ghost of Christmas present showing Scrooge two children, a boy who embodies ignorance and a girl who embodies want. The fact that it's a girl and a boy echoes the idea of the youth in society who are being corrupted with these attitudes of ignorance and want, which is a responsibility for people like Scrooge to make sure that they aren't. This is also really effective because, again, we see the aspect of the supernatural being used to guide Scrooge's morals, and in some ways this links with religion and Christian values. Essentially, Christians are guided by a force which they can't necessarily see, whether this be the Christmas spirit or God. And although Christians can't see it, it plays a big role in the way they lead their life. So the inclusion of the aspect of the supernatural intertwined with Christmas would really appeal to Christian audiences. Also, the idea of them being ghosts helps because, as we know, the Victorians loved Gothic, so it was very on theme with what was popular at the time. Okay, so now moving on to the spirit of Christmas. The first quote shows Fred expressing his excitement for Christmas. This is when he invites Scrooge for Christmas dinner and Scrooge refuses. This quote shows Fred to be inclusive of everyone, completely contrasting Scrooge's attitude. Also, the exclamation marks emphasise his genuine passion and enthusiasm for the holidays, even when he's met with Scrooge's rejection. This is how Fred almost acts as Scrooge's foil in the first few staves of the text. The second quote is what the ghost of Christmas present says to Scrooge whilst showing him the joy and togetherness of people celebrating Christmas in Stave 3. In this quote, you can talk about the juxtaposition of infection and disease and sorrow and contagious as laughter and good humour. This is one of the longer quotes, so remember you can shorten it down and use ellipses for the bits that you remember the most, like this. It can be one of the worst feelings in the exam when you feel like you had a great quote to use for what you're being asked about but being unable to remember it, so hopefully this is a good technique you can use. Examiners also like this because it means you're able to take out the relevant bits of the text, so they'll almost never really know that you forgot the rest. Just make sure the quote makes sense and is relevant to your discussion. Okay, so now let's move on to family and community. The first quote is the narrator describing the Cratchit family. They're presented to be humble and not necessarily wealthy, but still able to celebrate Christmas despite their poverty. This is how Dickens portrays the joy of Christmas to be something that doesn't require money, but it's still considered to be worth so much in itself. For close analysis, we can look at the ellipsis here, physically dividing the two realities of the Cratchit family's lifestyle. But they just simply choose to focus on one more than the other, or in other words, they don't let their poverty get in the way of their Christmas and are able to separate the two. Now for the second quote, this is a great one to remember because you can use it to compare and contrast. Scrooge being described as an ogre animalizes him, evoking the idea that him not wanting to celebrate Christmas is almost unhuman-like. This is how Dickens shames Christians who care more about money and wealth than celebrating Christmas. This was a growing issue at the time as it came along with the development of the Industrial Revolution, which meant that the rich were getting richer and the poor were left to work in harsh conditions, like the warehouses. Therefore, Dickens is reminding people not to lose their Christian values in the rush of this societal change. For this quote, also take note of the mention of his name casting a dark shadow. We'll touch on the symbolism of light throughout the text in just a second, but here specifically it reinforces the Gothic theme and the nature of Scrooge's character. So finally moving on to our last theme, which is time and memory. We can see in this quote, the shadow and light imagery is used again. However, this time it's by Scrooge himself. He is up on Christmas morning, filled with hope for the future and basically saying that he'll shed his shadow and begin to embrace Christmas. This awakening he has functions to inspire Christian audiences not to lose sight of the importance of Christmas. Also, the use of the repetition of the phrase, "they will," shows Scrooge's determination to make a change. In this second quote, again we can see the use of light imagery, describing Scrooge to experience his memories from the past, where moments of joy and sorrow are juxtaposed. This ultimately confirms how Scrooge has been impacted by his memories and therefore transformed in a redemptive manner over time. So that's all the themes and key quotes we'll look at today. Make sure to comment which ones you like to use in your exams. As always, I really hope it was helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.